geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and kittens, mein Damen and Herren, senors and senoritas, comic book fans the world over. This is another exciting, thrill-packed, intellectually satisfying episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, Chuck Dixon, questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books, and after this sip of water, I shall entertain you and satisfy your deepest curiosities about the world of comic books. How pretentious was that? Okay, let's start with Rex Moss. How did you approach rebooting GI Joe? How did you make it better? Number one, we weren't going to make it better. Nobody said, Larry Hama, he didn't know what he was doing. We're going to show him how to write GI Joe. No one said that. No one said that. What we were going to do is basically relaunch GI Joe for a new audience. That was our intention, and of course for the longtime fans. And when you're thinking about the longtime fans, your philosophy better be, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't think the subject was even brought up. I think it was just an unspoken agreement between me, the editor at the time, Mike Costa, and Christos Gage, who were the other writers writing the other books in the series. And I think we just all in agreement, we're just going to do what Larry did. We're going to use his characters and his situations and his relationships and all the rest of it. Now, the difference, you're going to say, well, then, why not just have Larry write everything? Why bother with a relaunch? Well, there was a reason that the relaunch was tempting, and was the thing that drew me in. The thing that when I heard about it, I contacted IDW and says, am I in the running here? And they said, oh yeah, you're on the list. Larry wants you to write some GI Joe. And I'm like, cool. The coolest thing about this particular iteration of Joe was that we weren't tied to toy launches. Larry was, basically writing for Marvel, but working for Hasbro. I mean, Hasbro was like, put this in there, put this in there, put in the Cobra meat grinder, which I just made up. Don't go looking on eBay for that. Put that in this issue and feature it prominently, because we're going to release that about the same time the comic comes out. And Larry was like, yeah, cool. And that's the difference between every other movie toy or toy tie-in comic and what Larry was doing. Was Larry was into it. This wasn't just an assignment. Wasn't phoning it in. He wasn't hacking. He dug it. He just thought this was cool. I'm gonna, I'm given this enormous franchise that I'm gonna make even bigger, and I'm just gonna go wild with it. But he was, tied to the release of toys, which we weren't. And the other big difference is that he had introduced Cobra right away. Here's the good guys, here's the bad guys. Issue 1. And Cobra aren't a mystery or anything else. They are established as the lifelong nemesis of G.I. Joe. Mission number 1, stop Cobra. We weren't tied to that. And so we introduced, and I don't know whose idea this was. Maybe it was mine, maybe it was the editor's, maybe it was one of the other writers. I don't know. But the idea being, let's have Cobra be a mystery to G.I. Joe. The readers certainly know who's behind all these dastardly deeds, and they understand these clowns running around with a snake emblem on their chest and on their helmets. We know who they are, but Joe doesn't. It's like, when all of a sudden a new terrorist group pops up and we don't know their name till they, send in a letter with their name on it. They let us know, or we see their new flag, So Cobra was, we established from the beginning that Cobra was a mystery. We established the Joes. We show that they're a counterterrorism force. There's espionage elements. We show how cool the Joes are. And then we introduce Cobra. And G.I. Joe in the initial issues of all of the new G.I. Joe series we did, they have to uncover, learn more, go deep and learn more about Cobra, which was cool. I mean, for Mike Costas and Christos Gage's book, they dealt with all that espionage stuff, undercover stuff, um, finding more, out about Cobra, gathering intelligence, all the rest. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun, because we weren't tied to the restrictions that Larry had, and could just go crazy. Eugenus Rex, in 2035, Batman will fall into public domain as per US copyright law. How do you think DC might handle this situation? How would it alter the comics industry in general? Now, yeah, Batman goes public domain in 2035, but remember, it's only the earliest appearances of Batman. You're not going to have, I'm not sure if you have Commissioner Gordon. You certainly don't have Robin. You don't have the Joker for a while. I mean, your only villain I can think of is Hugo Strange. Lots of, Bat items will not appear until later. I'm not sure when the Batmobile appears. Wasn't he just driving around like a limousine at first? I mean, I don't remember. I didn't bother to go back and look. I don't do a lot of research for these shows. It's all out of my head, folks. Off the cuff. This is the way you like it. You know it. A little bit of improv here. But yeah, I mean, you're 2035, you're stuck with the earliest iterations. Same thing for Superman. You're stuck with, he can't fly. There's no Perry White. There's no Lex Luthor. There's no Jimmy Olsen. I mean, all these things came later. And many of them didn't even come from the comics. I believe Jimmy Olsen was a creation of the radio show. So, it's not going to be a very attractive Batman. I don't see how it's going to, now, people will certainly jump at it. You'll have indie publishers who will make hay out of this, but I don't see how it will affect the comic book industry as a whole. Plenty of characters fall into the public domain. I've written a bunch of them. Airboy, for me, most famously. But it didn't alter the comic book industry. So I really pity any creator who's assigned this. Unless they have some crazy take on it, which I'm sure they will. Look at what they've done with Winnie the Pooh and Steamboat Willie and the upcoming Tigger movie, where they've turned them into basically slasher movie villains. So, yeah, I guess somebody out there will do something crazy with Batman. But they'll be very, very limited in what they can do. Eugenus, you get a twin spin. Woohoo! Okay, Eugenus Rex is back. Do you think DC could adopt a militant stance and blacklist any creators that work on an out-of-house Batman project in order to maintain a high degree of quality in their canon? I don't know how concerned they are about a high degree of quality anymore. There's certainly a lot of creators that they've either blacklisted or just simply don't use anymore. I mean, you have a lot of high-powered talent who've worked on Batman in the past, worked for DC in the past, who are no longer apparently welcome there. So I don't know if they would, further punish creators that they don't already punish by not using them anyway. So, I mean, they have their darlings, and that's what editors do. They have their people they want to use and people they don't want to use, and never the twain shall meet. But they can certainly do that. I mean, certainly if a creator working for them now was foolish enough to agree to do a public domain Batman or Superman book, I'm sure DC editorial would frown on that. The most famous example of exactly that I can think of is back in the 90s. Rob Liefeld was working on one of the X-Men titles. I don't know which one because I didn't follow X-Men. He's working on one of the X-Men titles, and at the same time, self-publishing a comic called X Mutants, and it was EX-Mutants. And Marvel wasn't happy about it because basically he was doing the X-Men on his own and raking in a lot of cash. I mean, the book sold well. So Marvel is like, we don't really like you doing that. You got to stop doing that. And Rob's like, I don't see any reason. I'm making a lot of money here. And they said, well, if you don't stop doing it, number one, we're going to fire you off the X-Men. And good luck with selling X-Mutants after that. And then we're going to sue you out of existence. They're going to crush you. And editors told me at the time that Rob was like, he couldn't believe this. He couldn't believe that Marvel was so angry about him stealing their copyrighted characters and making money off them. He couldn't understand why they were so mad. And secondly, he asked them to not tell his mom because she'd be really pissed at him if she found out Marvel was going to fire him over his little dalliance with trademark violations, infringing on copyright. Oh, man. But yeah, they will. They'll come after you for no reason. They don't like who you voted for. They don't like the music on your playlist. They'll blacklist you. Triple spin. Look at you, Eugenist Rex. You're piling up the spins. Okay, Eugenist is back with, is it possible that DC could simply wrap up the title, wrapping up Bruce's storyline, and perhaps inviting in Batman veterans for one last spin in the Batmobile? No, that will never happen, and I'll tell you why. Merchandising. You can make your little independent Batman comic based on the early issues of Detective all you want. You try to sell an action figure or a decal or a sticker or a popcorn bucket with your public domain version of Batman, and they will fall on you from a great height. You will be splattered by their lawyers who are right now hanging on hooks, just waiting to go after people like you. They're waiting to talk to you outside, buddy, and you're in big trouble because you tried to infringe on the merchandising. And that's where the money is. Whether you like it or not, Batman is a global franchise, a global licensing bonanza. We're talking billions of dollars in merchandising, toys, clothing, any kind of tchotchke you can imagine. And you don't mess with that. The comics, much like Larry Hama's GI Joe, was created to help sell toys. Whether you like it or not, and I don't like it, comics are and the movies are there to sell merchandising. To bring it back to GI Joe, the GI Joe movies they made back in the early 2000s, they didn't make much money. They weren't very profitable, but they kept making them because they sold a lot of GI Joe toys. And sadly, that's where we are. Comics don't make any money. Denny O'Neil told me the last time DC made money purely off a comic book, the last comic book project that was profitable for DC was Nightfall. And after that, every comic published after that by DC and Marvel was a loss leader. And they're simply to prop up the merchandising, simply to be a warehouse of ideas, not a house of ideas, a warehouse of ideas for movies, TV, whatever. And when you have something like Batman, which instantly recognizable the world over, there's almost no one. I ran into a guy once that didn't know who Batman was. How do you even do that? I think he was lying. Everyone in the world knows who Batman is. The symbol, he's instantly recognizable. And he's on everything and has been for decades. You're not going to let anybody take that away. And you're certainly not going to stop publishing the comics or giving up on the franchise, giving up on a license because, some, little, tin horn publishing house somewhere in Oklahoma or something. I'm not picking on anybody from Oklahoma, but starts pumping out public domain Batman stories. It's just never going to happen. Money, 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 money. That's what it's about. Sadly. Peter Bowl, Ripverse is doing their first anthology of 6 stories, and it looks awesome. As from Heels versus Babyface is doing a story about Ingrid Valdez. Did you consult with Az about his story with Ingrid so you wouldn't step on each other's toes? If you did, what kind of conversations did you have? I'm not asking for any spoilers. As is writing for the anthology. No, I'm just finding out about it as you are. I just found out about it, I think, yesterday or over the weekend. I can't remember. So I was not informed, which is no big deal. I don't own these characters, Alpha Core characters. I don't even have participation in them. And this largely grows out of the bromance that, very public bromance that Az and Eric July have as they, share videos and make each other giggle like schoolgirls. And that's great. It's kind of a promotional nuclear reactor when the two of those get together because Eric is obviously an influencer. He's made Ripverse what it is, and is very much an influencer. I mean, if you want to add $50,000 to your Kickstarter, you wrangle a way to get onto Az's podcasts so he can hold up the comic and talk about it and say wonderful things about it and make you money. So both these guys, movers and shakers. Why not? Plus, it's fun for Az. Now, they didn't consult with me. I don't own the characters, but I know that Ripverse is, very, very interested in maintaining continuity. I coined the phrase last week, ripannuity, and I'm really hoping it catches on. I keep using it in emails, but I'm the only one using it. And I'm sure they told Az, and Az isn't some piker. He's not coming in to pee in anybody's pool. So he probably was like, yeah, I want to make sure this character is as you wish her to be presented. And I'm sure they shared all the materials they have, including upcoming scripts that I've written in which he appears and other scripts upcoming in which he's appeared and let Az know. And then, of course, they've done it. They do it with me on these established characters, particularly Braxwell. They'll have notes or corrections, or maybe you want to do this, and I'm like, cool, I want to keep the character, the way you want the character to be, and I'm sure Az will adhere to that too. He's as much of a goofball as he is on YouTube, he's a serious guy when it comes to comics, and of course he wants to do his best work because when you make a career out of bitching about how everybody else effed it up, you want to make sure you don't F it up when you're writing. So I'm sure Az is sweating over this. I can assure you he is. But no, we didn't consult. Now, if he was to do a story about Zaylan or the Horsemen, which are characters that created by me and Joe Bennett, yeah, I would expect they would want to consult me. And within the Ripverse, I created a character who's appearing in Great War of Separation. That everybody loves this character, and a lot of people want to include her in stories, and they come back to me, and we've had Zoom calls in which I've described. Look, War of Separation happens a generation ago. These are the changes I see in the character. So when you present this character again, these are the alterations you're going to have to make, and everybody's like cool with that and everything else. So we all play nice and keep the ripannuity solid. Ripannuity. Jason Shepard, have you ever felt like you've been burned out on a particular series or character? Could you feel your creative battery running low? Or did someone have to tell you? Oh, God, that's the worst. Do you have a old man? You're finished. Do you have a way of avoiding burnout or revitalizing yourself in a book or a character? Have you ever walked away from an assignment because you felt you no longer had anything worthwhile to say? I've often turned down assignments or, begged off of assignments in which I felt I had nothing to say. Generally, and anyone who's worked with me will tell you this, when I'm approached to write something, I say, look, unless it's a character like the Punisher or a character I'm really dying to write. If it's a character new to me or a character I've never written or wasn't sure about, I would always say, look, give me till tomorrow to think about this. And it's not like, do I want to write the character? Do I not want to write the character? What I'm thinking about is, what story would I tell? Not how am I going to make this character mine or anything else. It's like, what do I do with this character? Do I have an interesting ideas in my head to propel this character forward? If I don't, then I call back the next day and say, no, somebody else would do a better job on this than me. I mean, I simply don't have any ideas. Or, it's not sparking off to me. I mean, when I was offered Robin, big assignment, the watershed assignment of my entire comic book career, I said I need some time to think about it. And by the time I got home, I went back home on the train. I had a whole bunch of ideas, and I knew I wanted to do it. So I called back first thing in the morning and said, "Yeah, I think I know what I want to do. I think I have a plot line, good solid plot line, and to proceed with, and the rest is Robin history." So, but how do you not burn out on a character you're doing? I mean, you've written 50 issues of a character. Can you write 51, or are you just asleep at the wheel? The solution to that is staying ahead of deadline. There's been a lot of times, not too many, because I generally know where I'm going on a book. If you notice, when I get on a book, I try to stay on as long as possible because I get into it and I just want to stay there. I just want to stay in Gotham. I want to keep riding along with Frank Castle because I'm digging it. But there were times when I handed in a Batman script and I really didn't know what I wanted to do the next issue. But if I'm 6 months ahead of schedule, I don't have to worry about that, do I? Because in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to think of it. I'm going to think, yeah, okay, my next Batman story will be this. And I don't have to write it for another month or so. So I have plenty of time to really build it up in my head and straighten everything out, make notes, do any research I need to do. So staying ahead of schedule is a huge part of it. It avoids burnout. It avoids writer's block entirely if you stay ahead of schedule because you're not under pressure. Writing under pressure is not fun. I have had to write under pressure a few times, but I saw it as a challenge. I saw it as, okay, you want me to leap over that 10-foot pole? I'm going to do my best. I'm going to take a run at it and see what I can do. And some of my, I don't want to toot my own horn, but some of my best work, or at least work that I was most satisfied with, was written under a tremendous amount of pressure. You got to have this done tomorrow. And, it's just, okay, boom, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit this. As long as I got a core idea, I can move forward. As long as I got an opening, I can sit down and start hammering away at the keyboard. So, yeah, I mean, and like I said, the worst thing you want to do is for them to come to you and say, yeah, we don't want you on this character anymore. You got nothing more to say. You're just retelling the same stories and everything else. No writer wants to hear that. And I've never heard that except for one independent editor. And he was angry because I took a miniseries in a direction he didn't like. And he said, I just hacked it out, which I was like, I'm never working for you anymore, buddy. Adios. Because I don't hack. I don't do that. Because it's no fun. It's no fun sitting there writing something you're not enjoying writing something you're not into. My mind doesn't come alive. The synapses aren't firing. I'm not using the wrong part of my brain, which I should be doing when I'm writing. I'm just sort of like, oh man, will this never end? When am I ever going to get to the end of this thing? That's hacking. And it's unpleasant. I might do a drive time all about hacking. How about that? Twin spin. Jason Shepard is back with, when you have someone who submits a lot of questions to your channel, how do you pick and choose from their questions? Do you set a limit on how many questions you answer from a particular person to keep it from being watch Joshua Ignatowski asked Chuck Dixon? Funny you should say that because I do have an all Joshua Ignatowski episode coming up. How do I pick the questions? If I have an entertaining, interesting, or informative answer for you, or if it's fun, or it sparks a story I want to tell. I mean, if you notice, I'm telling a lot of stories here, and you don't know to ask for those stories because I've either never told them to you before, or you didn't watch earlier videos, so you don't know them. But I'm going off on tangents nobody asked for. These questions, will they spark content? And I'll use all of them that do that. I use every question that does that. Now you're going to say, Chuck, I asked you this question 6 times, you never answered it. There's a number of questions I don't answer. Like, what do you think of Joe Slobotnik as a writer. Well, if I like Joe Slobotnik's writing, I'll talk about it. If I don't like Joe Slobotnik's writing, I won't mention him. As my mom told me, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I'm not about to start getting in a flame war with other creators and or their fans. I mean, if you like Joe Slobotnik's writing, God bless you. I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you found somebody that you relate to and enjoy and everything else. I think the guy sucks. I think he has no business being in the comic book business, and I wish he would go away. But I'm not going to say that because I'm not one of those guys. Now, I probably have a listenership of 100,000 if I did that, because that's how you get popular. Flame throwing, punching people in the face, writing poison pen letters. That gets you the clicks and the looks and the likes. But I'm just not that kind of guy, and I'm just not, over brimming with hatred for my fellow creators. It's like, if you like that, you like that. The other kind of questions I don't answer is when you ask me about things I don't like, or not things I don't like, things I'm not aware of or I haven't paid any attention to. I mean, you don't want to hear my opinion on some anime that I haven't seen. Like, what do you think of that? And, really popular things. And people assume, and they're right to assume, that I'm like some sort of pop culture sponge and I've seen everything. Yeah, I consume a whole lot of pop culture from over, decades and decades of output, but I don't see everything. Nobody can see everything. If you ever try to spend hours trying to figure out what you want to watch on Netflix, you realize you can't watch everything, and everything isn't worth watching. So those are the questions I don't answer. And then sometimes there's like stuff about my personal life, which I really don't want to share. I don't have to be ashamed of in my personal life. It's just, my family members and the rest don't need any kind of exposure like that. This show is about what I do for a living, not about everything else in my life. So kind of keep the business side and my personal life separate. Again, not that my personal life is boring as hell. There's nothing exciting there. There are no skeletons in the closet. Now that I said that, of course, I probably sparked a bunch of trolls to go looking. But the only skeletons in my closet are terrible things people have said about me in the past, without any kind of evidence. Boy, I can hear Google just firing up. There's a whole server farm of people going, what's Chuck Dixon hiding? Good luck. Oh, man. Ryan Barrett, with Mission Impossible Final Reckoning out now, I was wondering how you feel about the movie series. Were you a fan of the television show? Yeah, I want to see this new one. Like everybody else, I'm entertained by it. Was I a fan of the series? I was not a fan of the series from the beginning. I saw the first movie. I thought it was boring. I think I saw the second one. I thought it was boring. And then I was like dragooned into seeing the third one. I went with a bunch of guys to the shooting range on a Father's Day. And then the deal was we were going to go to the shooting range, go have lunch, and go to the movies. And I got outvoted on the movie. So we went to see Mission Impossible 3, which I just thought was stupid. Now, we come to Mission Impossible 4, and Brad Bird is directing. And I'm like, okay, now I want to see this. I want to see this. And of course, the promotions were amazing for this movie. So it's like, okay, I want to see it. And there were new cast members and stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, I want to see this movie. And it did not disappoint. And so I've watched everyone since then. So for me, the franchise begins with number 4. And because of that, because I didn't pay much attention to the first 3 movies, I don't know what the hell's going on with his relationships and that woman that he looks at but can't ever see. I don't know. I don't care. Don't explain it to me. I don't care. I just want to see the spy stuff and the punching and the kicking. and the suspense elements and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's a cool franchise. I like the last one. I look forward to seeing this new one. So there you have it. Now the TV show, I watched the TV show, and I remember my brother-in-law at the time was crazy about this show. He just raved about Mission Impossible, but I didn't watch the first few seasons, and I thought, well, why didn't I watch it? I like spy shows, and because my brother-in-law couldn't shut up about it, why didn't I see this show? And then I went back and I looked at the old TV listings, and it was on Saturday night against Get Smart. I was never going to miss Don Adams. So I missed the first few seasons. I remember Mission Impossible after Get Smart was canceled, Mission Impossible went on, and I remember watching it occasionally. And then it moved to another night. I think I moved to Sunday nights, and then I watched it, weekly. So I caught up with it later on when Leonard Nimoy was on. But I did watch a bunch of them. I enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite show. Even as a adolescent, I found some of the things really, really contrived. Talk about running out of ideas. I remember one where the trick at the end, the way they trick the bad guy is Peter Lupus and oh God, the other character, where how they would cut away to them doing something and you didn't know what they were doing, and it would be revealed at the end of the show. And what they were doing was building a brick wall to block the villain's escape route. And I thought, well, that's really contrived. Twin spin! Yoo-hoo! Ryan Barrett is back with the movie series seemingly coming to an end, and the James Bond franchise has a big question mark over it now that it's in the hands of Amazon. What do you think is the future of the spy genre in popular entertainment? Now let's talk about Bond at Amazon. Everybody assumes Bond at Amazon, it's going to be woke, it's going to be girly, it's going to be stupid, everything else. I'm like, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. Apparently, they fired a big exec over her plans for James Bond. And they fired her because it didn't jibe with what the license holders. I mean, they didn't sell Bond to Amazon, is my understanding. They licensed it. And the license holders were really, really unhappy with what this exec was going to do, the plans for James Bond. So they aced her. That's a good sign. Secondly, look at what Amazon has done. Enormous success with Jack Reacher. Enormous success with things like Terminal List. They understand there's an audience for this that wants unadulterated, macho male fantasy action adventure. They understand this, and they're not going to screw it up with James Bond. They're going to keep it as pure as they possibly can. Now I hear things about Jack Reacher's going woke and everything. Okay, fine, whatever. But still, I don't think they're going to mess with Bond. My wishes for Bond is that they set it during the Cold War, that they make it a period piece, not try to modernize it in any way. And then, of course, they're talking about possible spin-offs and things like that, whatever. But I think let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. Amazon may not mess this up. And what will tell the tale, and I've heard some encouraging things there, are the creators they're bringing on board to work on the franchise. People that have never worked on Bond before, who have, in my mind, a really solid track record of, making escapist entertainment. So let's hold off there on that one. Now, as far as the spy genre goes, the spy genre really only lived in the early 60s. Spy mania lasted a while. Bond is a survivor of that. Mission Impossible was basically resurrected from that. They tried to resurrect Man from U.N.C.L.E. and failed. So the spy genre is really a moment in time. And you can't really recapture that lightning in a bottle. I mean, I remember when Bond came out and it was spy, spy, spy. we put away our cowboy guns and we got spy guns. Every kid at Christmas got either a James Bond gun or a Man from U.N.C.L.E. gun. I was fortunate. I got both. So, so and as quick as it came upon us, it was over. The spy mania didn't last very long. And the only one left standing was Bond. I mean, he never made a third R. Man Flint movie because it was over. The cycle was over. But Bond survived in much the same way that as the superhero cycle grinds to a halt, Spider-Man and Batman, they will continue making Spider-Man and Batman movies because they will survive the end of the comic book superhero movie cycle. So, as a genre of spy stuff, I mean, they always make spy movies, but we're never going to see what we saw before. And I don't think the genre's in any trouble. I mean, Jason Bourne had its run for a while. So, we're still going to have that stuff. And over in France, they continue with OSS 117. OSS 117 was a serious spy series, very much like James Bond, made in France, often with American actors for some reason in the lead. And they made like 5 or 6 of them during the spy craze, and they're kind of cool. They're lower budget Bond films with a really, really like Euro thriller feel to them. And then, recently they resurrected it as a parody series. It's Jean Dujardin is awesome as OSS 117, set in the Cold War, and they make a lot of fun off of him being casually racist and sexist, all the rest of it. The movies are really, really funny. Dujardin has such great comic chops. So if you've never seen one of these, they made 3 of them, and I think they plan a 4th. You need to check them out. They're just they're beautifully filmed and just funny, and just the period detail and capturing the attitudes of this effete jerk of a spy. It's just good stuff. Vincent asks, a family member is currently writing a book, and they are curious on how copyright trademarks work. The book pertains to a technique that they have developed in their field of work and explaining how it was developed and its applications. The question that comes up is, do we need to trademark the name of the technique first before putting the same titled book out? Or is putting out the book enough protection for us to apply for trademark later down the road? I've heard that applying for copyright and or trademark can take years, so I'm hoping that the book title would give us enough protection. If you need me to give more detailed explanation, I can. Yeah, copyrights don't take a long time. You can apply for a copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office online and have it in your hand in a couple of weeks. Trademarks is a whole different ballgame, and you really need a lawyer to walk you through the minefield of trademarks, and it can get expensive. How expensive, I don't know, because I've never done it. Merely publishing the book would give you a common law copyright. It would be recognized as a copyright. The property would be recognized as yours, but you wouldn't have the same protections of having an actual copyright registered with the Copyright Office and the Library of Congress. And you would have no trademark protection. Somebody could steal this technique, whatever it is, right out of the book and start, doing whatever. I don't know what the technique is. If it's a dance routine, if it's a, massage technique, a surgical technique, whatever, anybody would be free to use it and rename it and call it their own, and then trademark it and sue you. So trademarks take a while. Now, if this is a technique, and I don't know what a technique is, and I don't need any further explanation about it, but would this require a patent, a U.S. patent, which takes even longer and is even more expensive? So is this thing going to pay off in the end? My dad invented something back in the 80s and didn't bother with trademark, patent, or rest. He just pushed as much of the product out there as he could and made as much money as he could until the inevitable imitators showed up. And these days it's even worse because you've got imitators from China, Vietnam, India, and they will just jump all over your copyright and trademark and patent, even if you have them all registered, even if you've done the due diligence and spent all the money, they'll just steal it anyway. So it's really like, how much money do you want to spend up front versus how much potential money do you think you're going to earn off of this thing? Do you want to lay out thousands of dollars for something that may bring back $500? Or is this something that's going to change the world? And if you don't make sure you've copyrighted, trademarked, and patented it and fully protected yourself, you're going to be sitting, crying someday because somebody else made a fortune off it. So it's really, it's up to you. But I know nothing about trademark because I've never gone through that painful process. Others have gone through it for me. Oh boy, another twin spin. Let's go for it. Vincent is back with another question I have is on your YouTube videos at the end. It always asks us to reach you at brunobookstore@gmail.com. Who is Bruno? Where is the bookstore? Is it a physical location? No, I don't own a bookstore. Might be cool for a minute or two to own a bookstore. But I'll leave that to the folks that really enjoy that. The happy warriors who are at every used bookstore. Mine would obviously be a used bookstore. No interest in selling the crap that comes out today. But yeah, there is no Bruno bookstore. It's just quite frankly, it's an email I use so you folks will ask me questions and then I can put you on my email list, because building an email list is a major thing when you're doing crowdfunder and independent projects and things like that. And so I can inform you of my upcoming products. In other words, I've basically dumped you into my own ad pool, which I don't share. I don't share my email list. So I'm not, you're not going to get strange calls in the middle of the night about car warranties because Chuck Dixon sold your email address and, whatever. So yeah, there's no bookstore. Now, Bruno Books comes from my self-publishing effort, Bruno Books, which is how I initially published Leave on Cade, Bad Times, and a lot of the other novels that I've done. I published them under this imprint. And who's Bruno? Well, yeah, I mean, I should say Shrinkage is the only book currently published under the Bruno Books imprint, because I can't get any of my publishers interested in it, because it's not a series, it's not a whatever, but I consider it my best novel. But that's just my opinion. But that's the only book you can buy now that has the Bruno Books imprint. So who's Bruno? Bruno was a cat I owned. You saw him in the logo. Bruno is we adopted him at a PetSmart. And he was a Tonkinese, and he was a macho dude, which is why we called him Bruno. He's one of those muscular cats with big thick neck, big thick tail, and but he's a real gentleman. He's a real gentleman, and smart as a whip. I don't want to tell a bunch of cat stories, but we had one of those tubs with the screw top lid that we kept the dry cat food in, and this guy was able to unscrew that. He just work at it and get it off and help himself. So Bruno Bookstore is named for Bruno. Here he is napping. In his pose we called the Bruno. Just completely spread eagled, flat on his back on whatever horizontal surface was available. So, next question, Tim Adams. Hey Chuck, I recently heard a story about some comic writers in the 70s who secretly worked in their own continuing stories that were hidden across multiple issues without telling their editors. For example, a guy would load something in the trunk of his car in an X-Men issue, and that same guy and car would be drawn into a Superman issue that came out soon after. Just curious, have you ever done anything like this in your own work? Have you ever been surprised by what you've been able to sneak past editors? Yeah, this stuff happened in the 70s. And a lot of these writers were editors too. All of the comic book writers and editors, you think about the 70s, a lot of the comics were written by the people editing them, or they were editing each other's comics. And this was true all the way into the 90s. And a lot of these guys knew each other. They'd go out to lunch, they'd socialize together. It didn't matter if you were from DC or Marvel. And DC or Marvel was, it was like a swingers club. They were switching freelancers back and forth anyway. So, a guy would work for DC for a while, go over to Marvel for a while, and then go back to DC. So all these guys knew each other in the New York area. And yeah, I've heard this, but I don't have any examples of it, but I've heard of guys doing that. It seems like, they were doing it so they weren't bored with their own writing. Like I was bored with their writing. I'm not naming names. It's okay. I'm following my own rules. And they would do all kinds of immature stuff at that time. And even when as a comic fan in the 70s, I thought it was immature. I remember a DC comic, a science fiction series, where a lot of the action took place on a planet called Merde. And it's like, I knew Merde meant shit in French. I mean, what are you doing here? What are you, 12 years old? Yes. Yeah, basically. They were 12 years old. But I was never that kind of 12-year-old. So I didn't think it was funny. I just thought it was stupid. You're not fooling anybody. You didn't fool me, and I didn't take French in school, but I knew all the foreign curse words. So yeah, I mean, because you had this crossover between the companies all the time, because it was the same dozen or so guys writing all the comics, whether they were at DC or Marvel or wherever, or Charlton or Archie. It's all the same guys. You were going to get these little schemes they talked about over lunch, and he. But who cares? It all seemed kind of silly to me. Now, like I said, the editors were writing this stuff, and even when the editors weren't writing this stuff, they weren't paying that close attention to what was going on anyway. Yeah, read some 70s comics. I mean, I rest my case. The writing is horrible in almost all of them. I mean, I think even more so than today. I can point to a bunch of well-written comics today. There were only like a few in the 70s. The DC War comics and westerns, Savage Sword of Conan, and between the two mainstream publishers, that's what Kirby was doing. That's basically it. Everything else was really bad. Now, did I ever sneak things past an editor though? Well, I snuck things past that weren't like childish or stupid in my mind. Only one time that I sneaked stuff in, and it didn't hurt anything, and no one noticed but me. But Denny really hated the 1966 Batman TV show, and I thought I could see why. I could see why his whole comic book writing career was a reaction to that show, and I understood. But I liked the show, and I wanted to reference it now and then. So that wasn't subliminal advertising. I just got ahead of myself. But I like the show. So every once in a while, I put in a subtle reference to it. I named one of the bridges because I love naming things in Gotham City. Nothing had a name, and I was trying to create some, continuity, some consistency with names for streets and buildings and things like that. And I named one of the bridges out of Gotham the Westward Bridge. And of course, Denny never realized. He thought I was referring to the direction, but of course, it was for Adam West and Burt Ward. Look, I didn't hurt anything, and I wasn't hiding any French cuss words in it. And the only other one I can think of at the moment was Batman basically deploys. He and Robin are in the Batmobile, and he deploys a drag chute to turn the Batmobile in a 180. Basically, does a bootlegger's turn with the Batmobile, and I simply had Robin, who's very shook up in the suicide seat, turn to him and said, you could warn a guy next time. Obvious reference to Bat Turn, Robin. Like I said, subtle. And Denny never noticed it, or if he did, he never said anything. I think Scott Peterson may have twigged on that one, but it was fun for me knowing that I was paying homage to Adam West and company. Okay, something big is out. All 4 books. The sci-fi epic by me and Frank Fosco. It's a genre mashup of a science fiction alien invasion story and a heist story. and people are liking it. People are saying they dig it. Frank, he just amazing storyteller. Loved working with him. Loved putting all this together, and it is available on Amazon, or you can go to Arcaven Comics and buy it directly from them. But all 4 issues are out now. You can read the whole thing. It's a done-in-one story that runs, I don't know, over 200 pages total when we get to the end of it. Oh, well over 200 pages. I think we're closer to 300 pages here. Anyway, I'd appreciate it if you would check that out over at Amazon. I think I'll put a link down here below the video. And if you do want to get a hold of me at the aforementioned email address of brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com, the most reliable way to reach me. So that's it for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the questions keep coming. I think you're going to run out of questions, and you don't. The questions keep coming, and I'm digging answering them. I hope you hear it in my voice that you folks are entertaining me as I entertain you. And thanks for looking in. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for all the things you do. And I will see you all down the road.